Welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. Today we're driving big tractors, talking to longtime livestock handling expert Temple Grandin, and taking a look at the financial picture for farming in 2016 with Kent TC. And we have a new guest feature, Lynn Kettleson, joins us to talk about weed management. Stay with us, Farm Connections is next.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Programming supported by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned cooperative in Claremont, Minnesota, producing ethanol, high-protein livestock feed and corn oil, and beverage-grade carbon dioxide, all for resale, working to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood.
We traveled to rural Grand Meadow, Minnesota to the Rick and Peggy Gehling Farm to learn a little bit about technology and some of the changes that are happening in agriculture. And with us today to help with that is Rick and Peggy's son, Randy.
Hi, Dan.
Well, thanks for letting us come to your farm, Randy.
Yep, thank you.
What a beautiful setting. We've got some corn plants and bean plants growing, but behind us and around us is a lot of technology. What's changed on the farm in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of technology?
I guess I'd have to say steering, row unit capabilities like electronic drives, pneumatic down pressure, hydraulic down pressure, iPad technology, I guess. I mean, it's all from the yield monitor to the planter monitor, I guess. Or from the planter monitor to the yield monitor.
Well, that's a lot of complicated and fancy words, Randy, but what does it mean?
The technology, I guess, on a precision planting would be like you got your iPad, you got your 2020 monitor, which your iPad is your planting monitor now, which tells you your seeds per acre, your population, your downforce, your population singulation. I mean, and then it's got electric drive units that drive every row unit separately, so you get rid of your chains, your sprockets, your bearings. And then there's seed tubes with this precision planting too that's called wave vision that actually catches every seed and eliminates the dust, so you get a more true reading of what's actually happening.
Sounds like accurate placement, accurate count,
Yep.
and good growing.
Yep.
Why do farmers like yourself embrace technology?
I think it's the real-time data that you're getting. I mean, you get to see it as you're doing it and while you're doing it, and it's saved and it's quick to look back and see what you've done.
Farmers need data?
Yeah, they need good data.
Why?
To make good decisions, I guess.
And you make a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
What are some of those that you use the technology to make?
Well, just anywhere from seed selection to hybrid selection, all the same thing, I guess, but fertilizer to, I guess, what grows good where, soil types.
Well, I noticed you spend a lot of time in the winter. Most people think the farmers that grow crops have the winter off, but I noticed that Randy and your family spends a lot of time looking at the books, looking at the data. When you said selecting a hybrid, why are you selecting certain hybrids?
Certain hybrids, like, which do good in certain soil types, I guess, over sand, a little sandier ground, you probably want to thin out the population, and by doing that with these electronic drives, you can look at a yield map from the previous year before or 2 years previous and plant that variety to that soil type accordingly, I guess.
And that drives a higher yield?
Yeah, drives a higher yield and better input selection, I guess. I mean, you can cut back where you need to cut back and apply more where you need to apply more.
Being efficient.
Yep, being more efficient.
So you talk a lot about yield. Why is that important to you?
That's your bottom line. The more yield you can get, the more profit, I guess.
And a hungry world needs yield in food, right?
Yep, more food.
So how does a farmer shop for technology?
You can find it online, magazines, friends, partners, I guess.
So you spend some time visiting with friends about?
Yeah, back and forth between different meetings and social media. You find all kinds of stuff on social media about it.
Are there some differences between farmers that are in their 50s or 60s compared to farmers your age in how they adapt and use technology?
I think it depends. I mean, you'll see some guys that are in their 50s and 60s adapting to technology, and other ones that don't want to have anything to do with it.
Do you have meetings with the partners in your farm, including mom and dad, to talk about the results of the technology?
Yeah, we'll sit down together and I'll show them what data I brought in from the planting maps and the yield maps, and we'll discuss them and look them over and make decisions off of that.
What kind of people or companies do you work with on the technology piece?
Precision planning, field view cab, yield sense, it's kind of all precision planning.
With any new technology, we need people that know how to use it. How do you train and educate yourself?
I guess it's just, for me, it's trial and error. I guess I can usually jump in something and figure it out, I guess, or if I need help, I'll call technical support and they'll tell me how to do it, or friends and family, if they know how to do it, I'll ask.
Well, you've been able to figure this technology out on your own. Can you teach me?
Sure.
Randy, this is where the technology comes alive and you apply it. What's on the top screen?
Right now, this is the iPad, which is showing, I guess, a visual of the farm where we're sitting right now, which would be in the yard. You can see a little tractor sitting there.
And that's the actual farmyard where we're at, right?
Yep.
And then below that?
This would be the 2020 Precision Planting Monitor, the Gen 2, that basically tells you everything about your planter, from the V-drives to the downforce to the singulation to the population, skips, multiples, acres, spacing, you name it.
Nice.
Just about everything.
Well, walk us through how you use this technology. We're sitting in your cab, we're hooked up to the planter, and show us how this technology actually makes your job easier and improves yields.
Well, basically, I guess it just shows you real-time data, and then I got everything saved to the cloud. So, it's storing it. If you ever lose your information, you can pull it up on any iPad or computer. So when you go into a field, you just go in, select a farm field that you've already had set up, or if you don't have set up, you can add it, and then it'll ask you if you want to change the field or activate the field, so you can click yes. Then it'll bring up the farm and field where you're at. So it'll show you your farm and field. It'll come up, it'll give you a background, kind of where you're at in the area. And as you're planning, if we were planning and had the planter on, the air vac on, it would show a left vac, right vac. It'll show you where you're running at for basically your singulation. Your skips and your multiples. If you got more skips, I turn the vac up. If I got multiples, I'll actually turn the vac down, so I can tweak that throughout the field on basically seed size is what it is, how much it sticks to the plate and how much it slips off the plate.
In this case, that air pressure is actually part of the planting metering mechanism.
Yeah, the air for the downforce, that'll show you how much downforce you have per row unit. Right now we're sitting up in the air, so it's showing no downforce. And it'll give you a ground contact, which basically is telling you how much the depth wheels are contacting the ground. And then the margin of error will tell you how much margin you have from no ground contact to positive ground contact. I guess throughout the field I change it depending on soil condition.
Can you pull up a soil map?
Yeah, if you go to a certain farm and you got like I went in and made a prescription for this farm by soil type, or you could do it by yield data that you've had over the past years, but I just did this one off soil type. And after you're done planting, or this is basically, once this comes up, it'll show you what the soil types were and what populations I designated to the soil types. And the reason for doing that is there's a little lighter soil on this farm, so I plan accordingly by soil types to put less population in those areas and more population in the heavier ground, which in turn should produce more and waste less.
So you're actually, in your most productive area, which is the green, you're putting the most seeds per acre.
Yep.
And then hopefully the stand is the greatest per acre, because that
Yep.
soil has the capabilities of producing.
Yep.
And the other spots, you don't want to deplete the resources that are there and utilize to the best advantage what is there.
Yep.
Wow, fascinating. Before that, you had troubles doing that based on a soil map or variable planting rate until the technology helped.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was more complicated before. I mean, before you had to do it on a laptop or a desktop and save it to a thumb drive, bring it out to the planter monitor, download it or import it, and then pick the prescription or RX file. Now you can do this at the touch of your iPad.
On the go.
On the go, in the cab. I've done it going down the road to the next farm, I guess, by soil type.
And before that, we couldn't adjust at all unless maybe we changed sprockets on the planter.
Yep, change sprockets or had hydraulic drive, which in turn is every row. This, with the V drives, I can do row by row. So as soon as you hit a different soil type, it's already changing row by row in the field. So you get more of a uniform, I mean, it follows right to the contour of, you know, you can see that, how visual it is. It just
Follows
looks
your
like
soil type.
Yep.
So you put all this time and energy and money into the technology on the front end of planting and preparing the field. How about at harvest time?
Well, at harvest time, it gives you real-time data too, and I mean, you can split the screen while harvesting, and it'll show your planting map to the left, and it'll actually show you out there harvesting that field by hybrid or soil type, and you can see that in real time. And after you're done with that field, or even before you're done with that field, you can click a button, get your planting summary or your harvest summary, and send it to one of your trusted advisors within, I mean, seconds.
Does the tractor steer itself?
Yep, tractor steers itself, so you can pay attention to everything else.
You know, Randy, I saw your straight rows and I was giving you credit in my mind for how straight. They're just
Yeah.
awesome. But now you're telling me you hired technology to help you.
Hired technology to help. Yep,
Well,
makes
you-
it more easy.
Well, you're a smart man for doing that. And so in reverse, when you're harvesting in the fall, you get the same soil maps, and then your combine moves across the field and monitors yield by the acre.
Yep, by the acre.
So now you know if your results are positive or if you need to make adjustments for the next year.
Yep,
Wow,
on the
tremendous.
go, real time.
Is that attracting young people like you into agriculture?
I think so. It's very advanced.
More coming, right?
More coming. It only grows every day.
Well, are you gonna let me drive this thing?
You can drive it.
Okay. Cam Tisi is up next, talking about the financial outlook for 2016.
Thanks, Dan. There's been increasing concern regarding the struggling agriculture economy and the impact that may be having on farm families as well as on rural businesses and communities. Many crop producers had a negative profit year in 2015, and profit margins in 2016 for both crop and livestock producers are projecting at negative levels. Ag lenders are becoming increasingly concerned with the declining farm economy as well as the future viability of some farm operations. Total U.S. net farm income for 2015 was $56 billion, which was down 38% from 2014 and was at the lowest level since 2002. 2015 crop yields in the upper Midwest were 10 to 20% above normal, which certainly helped offset some of the declining crop prices in 2015. The 2015 corn and soybean crop was still in storage, a high percentage of that, in late winter of 2016, which may even further lower the value of last year's crop. Good news for crop producers was that total crop expenses declined by about 2% in 2015, with the biggest drops in fuel and fertilizer. Some other expenses, however, such as seed, chemicals, and land rental costs, stayed relatively high. Cash rental rates continue to be above break-even levels for many producers. A large number of crop producers are facing 2016 break-even costs that are higher than the cost of production. Break-even costs for corn are typically $4 a bushel or higher, and probably well above $9 a bushel for soybeans. Less than 10% of the farm operators are facing serious financial difficulties, according to many ag experts for 2016. However, if we continue with the lower crop prices, many farm operators will need to make some serious adjustments to avoid difficulty for 2017. The reality is that unless we have some unforeseen improvement in grain prices in the coming months or changes in the farm economy, we are likely to continue to be in an environment of very tight or negative profit margins in crop production for the balance of 16 and well into 17. Farm operators that are facing some serious challenges or expect difficulty in meeting loan payment commitments need to address these issues sooner than later, while there's still more options to address these serious concerns. I'm Kent Tesey, and we'll see you next time.
I'm Dan Hoffman in Mankato, Minnesota at the Ag Symposium at South Central College. And with me today is a renowned animal handling expert, Dr. Temple Grandin. Welcome to Farm Connections.
Nice to be here. Okay?
Well, you've got an interesting book here, Humane Livestock Handling. Tell me about the book and what your work has been all about.
Well, today in the talk I talked about some basic principles like flight zone, point of balance, make sure the coats are not hanging on your chutes, and get rid of the vehicles parked around the chutes, because those things can make cattle balk. People understand some basic principles of behavior. It's going to make it a lot easier to handle animals. And there's some real good advantages to handling cattle and other livestock really quietly. When animals get fearful and afraid of people, they're going to gain less weight. There's some scientific evidence that animals that are fearful during handling have lower conception rates after artificial insemination. There's lots of good reasons for handling animals quietly. Also, the public's getting much more concerned about how animals are treated out on the farm. And there's been some bad videos that have shown up from activist groups. We got to make sure that everything we do, it's going to look good on this. It's a new world out there.
Great advice. And I will say, as both being raised on a farm and being around farmers all my life, the majority really want their livestock to do well, because that's how farmers make their living.
That's right. Most people are handling animals well, but the good news is animal handling has improved. I've been around since the 70s, and back in the 70s and 80s, people were a lot rougher. They just thought that was the way to do it. That has changed, and that's a good thing. And some of the techniques that I taught today was walking back past an animal to get it to go forward in the chute. Kind of counterintuitive, but you walk back in the opposite direction of desired movement. When you cross the shoulder, when they're right in the chute, your animal's going to go forward.
Well, some of the changes you speak of, I believe, have come from training and trade groups like pork producers and others, training truckers and training farmers and livestock handlers. Would you believe that to be true?
Yes, those trucker quality assurance programs, that's really important. And I've done a lot of work with the American Meat Institute, which is now the North American Meat Institute, and I wrote their original guidelines and audit guide on animal handling, because it's really important that you measure animal handling. Then I can tell, am I getting better or am I getting worse? And I worked with McDonald's and Wendy's and other companies on implementing this auditing program. And this resulted in tremendous change. I didn't tell them how to build a plant, but they had to achieve their numbers. They had to achieve certain outcome scores.
How much have we improved?
Actually, a whole lot. My student Ruth Woolly did a survey of 28 large feed yards in Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska, and it's improved a whole lot.
Nice.
Electric prod score is only about 5% on the average. That's really good falling down, coming out of the squeeze chute was just under 1%. That's doing really well compared to the bad old days. But the problem is, public doesn't know about it.
Well, how do we get the public engaged in learning what the real truth is?
Farmers need to communicate with the public. Survey data done on consumers shows that about half of consumers consider a farmer or rancher as a credible source of information. Now, a big food company's PR department, then that drops down to 17%. Farmers need to be doing more to show what they do. Put things up on the Facebook page, because what's chores to the farmer is interesting to the public. You know, the public today is getting further and further removed from the farm.
Well, you mentioned more humane handling of livestock. You've played a huge role in that in both training, speaking, your advocacy work, your books, but also you've actually done some development work and design work on facilities. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And so my major work has been in the meat packing plants. I worked on developing a piece of equipment called the center track restrainer system. In fact, if you want to see that work, you can look at Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin. And the cattle in the large meat packing plants are handled in that. I also worked with McDonald's, Wendy's, and other large companies on auditing animal welfare. And that was back in 1999. And when these big companies started auditing animal welfare, I saw more improvements than I'd seen in a 25-year career prior to that. And some of the major things that people had to do to make improvements was simply repair broken equipment, put in non-slip flooring, lots and lots of training of handlers, and we did some changing of lighting. Animals are afraid of the dark, so we'd put a light on the entrance of the chute, and then the animals would go in.
Fascinating. And how did a person from Boston, Massachusetts move across the country and be an expert in Colorado about livestock? What's the story there?
When I was 15, my mother got remarried, and that brought a ranch into the family. This brings up the really important point. Students get interested in things they get exposed to. And if I hadn't been exposed to cattle, I would not have gotten interested in them.
That's an interesting thing in itself. And we do a lot on Farm Connections about FFA and 4-H work. Have you worked with those groups as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I was very big into 4-H when I was in high school. And those groups are so important. And unfortunately, there's some states that cut their funding to the FFA program. I think that's just absolutely terrible, because those are such great activities for so many kids, and it gets kids interested in farming, get them to go into a career in agriculture.
Are there careers available?
Oh, there's plenty of careers available.
Well, you're certainly an example.
Yep, and I have graduate students that are out in different jobs. One of them is Kurt Vogel at University of Wisconsin River Falls, and he's a professor there.
Neat. You must have a lot of pride in that.
Yes, I do.
How about future things in agriculture, and specifically animal agriculture? Any vision there?
Well, we need to make sure that animal welfare is always at the top of our mind. We always do good handling. Beef cattle, it's if you do have a problem, it's mainly management. There's some things in housing of swine that's probably going to have to be changed, but we need to be showing what we do. Fair Oaks Farm, Pig Adventure outside of Chicago, is doing a great job of showing a big dairy and a big pig farm to the public. We need to be doing a lot more things like that.
Well, the food chain is really important. We all like to eat.
That's right.
How can we as consumers and people in the public help that food chain be good and produce great food?
Well, I'm really, again, interested in some of the sustainability issues. Went to some very interesting sustainability talks up in Canada recently, where they were talking about crop rotation and how livestock is part of that rotation. It's part of the ecosystem. You know, some people say, well, cattle are just horrible methane generators, get rid of them. But then I started learning some things about crops, and we really need to be integrating the livestock back into the crop rotations, because that's good for the soil. That's going to be true sustainability.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Weed resistance has had a lot of press in recent years, and research continues on how best to handle this problem. The Minnesota Soybean Growers is one of many organizations studying resistance in a project with the University of Minnesota.
We've got a problem with herbicide resistance building, and all of our farmers know this. It wasn't such a big issue it wasn't an issue at all 10 years ago. About 5 years ago it started popping up, and now it's a major issue across the state.
The researcher says there are 5 weeds that are a problem in Minnesota. He calls them the Big 5.
Water hemp's number one. Across the board, water hemp. Then the ragweeds, common and giant. These are nice because you can control them early. Same with kochia and common lamb's quarter. The big problem is water hemp, and it germinates over such a large window that it's always out there, always present. You can't get past that problem. It's always there season long.
The Minnesota researcher compares dealing with weed resistance to a boxing match.
We almost have to take an approach similar to boxing. You don't just hit somebody in the chin, you hit them in the gut, you hit them on the shoulders, you hit them on the head. You hit them everywhere and you change it up. If you do the same thing every time, they dodge. Then you get hammered.
Farming has always been about management decisions, when to plant, what to plant, and when to sell. And now weed resistance is just another one of those decisions. Few of us have thought about it as a boxing match, but changing strategy and planning ahead is an important part of what farmers will have to do to control weeds in the future. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
Thanks for tuning in today. It's been a great start to the new season. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. Join us again next week on Farm Connections.